start out marking it so I know where to score the base. Apply slip and attach that. And then I could add another top if I wanted, or leave it as it is. But these slabs, as you can see, I mean, that was well on the floor, but it didn't crack. It still got some plywood.
Plywood, yeah.
And as does this. But you don't ever want to add stiff clay to dry clay, or clay that is too much and different and dries. Because as clay dries, it shrinks, and if one piece is drier than the other, it has less shrinkage left remaining in it. So you put those two pieces together, it's like a horse race. They both go the same distance. Two horses go the same distance, but one has a head start, but there's tension in between. I don't know how that analogy plays out with a horse race, but you know, it's all going to end up at the same place. You want it to get there, both parts to get there together. Can y'all think of a good analogy? I was always big on analogies when I was teaching, but I'm teaching now. So okay, so that's a possibility. This is one right here that if I get it out of the bag. One thing I've learned that if I leave that piece of wood in there, it'll continue to dry, because that'll suck out a certain amount of moisture. If you got a piece that is just, you know, you want it to dry a little bit, but not too much, leave it on a board and wrap the board up with it, and it'll suck a little. And then when you come back, it'll be just a little bit drier, but still wet enough. So this is the same thing, just a ring. I pushed it into an oval, and then use this little tool. This is a Stanley tool, and it's just a wood rasp. I think they're actually made for sheetrock, but they work really well on clay. They cut going one direction and not the other. So there's enough thickness here that I can, now I want to get set up to do this. I always tried to impress on students when I was teaching at St. Edward's for so many years and other places too, the importance of getting set up when you're doing something like this and you're trying to do some real regular pattern, is to get it down at eye level. Don't be looking at it like this at some oblique kind of angle, but get down level with it and let that tool, just gravity, pull that tool down. So the first rotation around this, I usually just get a few little kind of preliminary carving done, you know, not do it very deep. And then the next time around, I go a little deeper, always keeping in mind the width of these little flutes. And you can do this with a fluting tool. It's basically just a loop tool, but this is so much more precise, and it
So
kind
you're
of
just trying to make those indentations more pronounced.
yeah, and taking advantage of some of the thickness that's there. I mean, right now it's pretty heavy, but by the time I finish this, it'll be fairly lightweight. And I'm putting just a little bit of an angle on there because I think that's maybe just a little bit more dynamic than just a vertical line. It's really fun to do. I mean, there's nothing more pleasurable than carving clay. And this is just one way of carving. I mean, it could be, you can carve anything, but I kind of like these real regular patterns. I think the challenge here is how you make that interesting. I mean, it's one thing to do some, you know, some figurative, carve an animal or something like that in there. But if you're doing something this mechanical, you gotta figure out some way to make that, give that some interest. And sometimes the best approach is real simple and real straightforward, not make it too complicated, not get too fussy with it. And then other times it's not quite enough. You know, you gotta go a step further, find another step that you can take that creates a little bit more interest and a little more visual variety.
Do you teach classes here?
Well, I have taught a class in this space back right after I opened the studio. Do you understand the question? Yeah, but it's a little crowded. I mean, I had 10 students in here, and I borrowed 9 wheels, and we made it work. But I think it just got a little too crowded. And probably the worst part about it, I would prepare for the class and move all my tables and all the equipment back and position the wheels, and people would come in for a 2-hour class and then they'd be gone, and then I'd have to move all stack the wheels up, and it took.
Maybe do a smaller class.
The short answer is yes, he does. He usually teaches them through the art center.
3 people.
Y'all wonder why I invite her. It's really, that's it.
You know, just do.
Yeah. Okay, so there are a lot of things I could do here beyond this. I'm gonna try coming up this other direction. See that little shape that makes? I mean, there's no way to anticipate that. You just kind of have to do it. Now I have to think, well, okay, then I've cut into this space, so I don't know. I'll just try to do that on every one and kind of see what happens. It's impossible to predict, but I think that's what interests me about this, is how I can, you know, this unexpected thing that happens, kind of an unpredictable thing. And to me, that's sort of the spirit of it. And I heard a painter talking that we were all looking at, and she commented that it was technically good, but it had no soul. And, remember that? I'm not altogether sure how you distinguish that, if there aren't a lot of different ways that you can interpret what she was calling soul. You know, it's a hard thing to define, and I'm not saying this is about that, but I think maybe what that boils down to is it's got to hold your interest. It's got to be something that, on one hand, doesn't get fussy and you know, too labored over, but on the other hand, interesting to look at. And I don't know how that relates to soul. I just keep trying to think, now how does that relate to my work? Is it just technically good, but is it soulless? I don't know, but interesting question. And but I think for me, if it holds my attention, and if whenever I look at it, I see something a little different each time, it keeps drawing me back, then that's kind of what I'm after.
You keep evolving.
Yeah.
So, as an artist, like, do you come at it with a plan, or do you just play with the clay and see what happens? I'm curious.
Well, that element of play is super critical.
Right.
I think, you know, all the years
Like, did you plan to do what you just did because I like the way it came? I mean, I already like the way.
Did I plan to do that?
Yeah.
I knew I needed to do more than just those diagonal lines, and I considered just maybe going, you know, making instead of a straight cut, making a curved cut. That might work too, but you know, you just have to try it. You can never really predict what's going to happen. So you have to be playful enough to try it. If you're afraid to try it, then that's the problem.
I suggest if you go to HEB in their cooking section, they have the microplanes, the small ones, which is exactly
this
what
one?
but
they don't have that much plastic around it, so it might give you a little bit more maneuverability.
Maybe. What I like
Yeah.
is
I
the
wanna
curve in them,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I can reach in there and I
Yeah,
can
you can
make a
actually-
cut this
yeah.
way, maybe make a concave, cut, same there. I mean, there's a lot you can do with a half circle. And then when you want a flat plane, let's say if you want to undercut that,
Okay.
pick up another little shape there. I mean, that can become super intricate,
Yes, yes.
yeah.
What do
So-
you see it being when you're
I already have a
You mean
vision.
functionally, what is it?
Yes, functionally, what would you?
Well, I'm not so concerned about that because it's a simple enough vessel form that, you know, I mean, what is a bowl? It could be a bowl.
I was thinking bread basket.
Sure.
It reminds me of the Corningware.
Yeah, I was thinking, yeah, like
Oh,
something similar to,
Corningware.
like a
Oh,
Corning,
yeah,
like, you know what I mean, like
Corning.
that
Yeah,
idea or that, but just the way it,
yeah,
So ramekin.
yeah.
It's giant
Yeah.
bread ramekin, yeah.
yeah.
And it could be,
Burger.
it could be a little taller and be a totally different functional kind of idea. And then, let's see, I'm gonna cover that one up, I can come back to it. But the other thing is, when it's,
Now, how
stiff
long,
enough to carve, is it too stiff to join a bottle?
yeah, that's kind of what
So
I was
what
wondering,
I
like,
would do
when
is
is that?
get this carving done. This may be a little on the stiff side, it's great for carving, but I'm not sure I can join a bottom, put a bottom in. So what I do is make the slab in advance for the bottom, make sure they're both the same. And, I would probably score this and, apply water just to the attachment point, cover it up and let it sit overnight, and that'll soften it up enough, it kind of back the drying up a little bit,
Right.
and then join it.
That's why I said it looks like the.
Oh, yeah, that's a very commercial idea there.
Yeah,
So, you know, I don't want it to
Going
be
in the
that
direction
clean,
that- I see
I
what
don't
you're
want it to be that,
yeah,
that's not the look I'm after,
yeah,
but,
that's pretty.
but it is, you know, not far from the idea. Let's see, I have another one, yeah, let me try that one right there. Now, there's a little cup there that is finished. I wouldn't say that is like the best example I've ever made, but, you know, it's the kind
whimsical.
of thing, yeah. Well, I'm glad you said that, because I kind of see it that way, even though it's very mechanical, you know. So this one, I'm gonna do a little something, different too. When I sit down and do that carving, I always have to be careful to turn the wheel off, so I don't accidentally put my foot on it and have it spin off. These are great
Wait, this
tools
is
for
a
trimming.
different plot than what we started with, right?
Yeah.
So not the first one of it.
Right.
You know, if you've got one of those spots that is really uneven and your trimming tool kind of goes like this, this is a good way to take care of it. So I don't want to go too deep. I just kind of want to lay that in there, and then so that'll give me another opportunity to refine it and sharpen it up the lines.
That's so cool.
Really awesome to watch.
I love that.
I'm pretty much gonna have to cut that off. So that I can
She's smart.
get it over to the edge. Otherwise, you know, if you don't get it over the edge, whatever board or bat it's sitting on interferes with your ability to do this. So I want it hanging off. Okay, let's see.
Somebody's phone.
the hook? You have a beeping?
I hear it over there.
Maybe it's my phone. Now, I find it works better to go around counterclockwise, because if I come to this side, then I'm blocking this, and I need to see that in relation to the next cut. So I kinda want that out of the way. But again, I'm just kind of laying it in there loosely, because number one, I don't wanna go too thin and go through the wall, and I wanna be able to clean that up. See that little shape there? Hard to predict. Well, I guess after you've done this kind of thing, it's not as hard, but it's surprising, the shapes that evolve.
Really cool.
I like the little points that come out, and that's all from just leaving that little shoulder there. So you could make that sharper on the next one and get maybe a more pronounced shape out of it. So once that's, well, I'll just work on this one side. So to know how deep to go and to get the shapes like repeated and similar, one shape to the next, I'm really watching the negative space. Like I don't want that to come together. It could, and that'd be a different idea. But if I wanted to maintain that, I would just make sure that this didn't connect here. That makes sense. Yeah. Whatever I decide to do, watching those, well, let's go a little deeper, just see what happens there. Okay, well, I like that. So then I want to watch these negative shapes to make sure that they're not, they stay pretty regular. And then the second go around, I would maybe go a little deeper. These lines will come together a little more, and the edges get a little sharper on the second pass. It's a little bit hard in a demo because, I'm not quite paying the attention that I need to. What I'm going to try and do is get this to a point where I can then come back with this one. Now, normally I would do this all the way around, get that series of shapes even and well defined, and then I can come back and bring out some other shapes. And then I could put it back on the wheel and redo these. I'm not gonna,
Can you turn that so we can see it over here?
yeah.
That's really pretty.
And you can see, this is still pliable enough that I could reshape it. Maybe push it into a square or something. I do plan to follow through with these, but it'll probably be tomorrow. I've sort of learned that, I tend to do so many demos that I don't want it to just be demos. I really want to try and follow through with them because it can become an important part of your production. I mean, why waste that piece? Now I've got one right here that I can sort of finish up with. This one would be like the third go around, which involves figuring out how to get it out of the battery. So you can see on that one, it gets much more clearly defined. And even if,
Now, is that Now, on that one, did you go back and go through that
Yeah.
circular, like you were
Yeah,
talking about the
I
other one?
cleaned it up
You cleaned it up,
again,
okay.
and I came back and sort of defined these little shapes a little bit better, you know, those flat
That's
shapes.
beautiful, yeah.
And I could go back and always have to rub my thumb over that surface to make sure I'm cutting the right direction,
Right
because it cuts one way and it just compresses the air. But I'd like to get these low points pretty
Yes.
sharp. And then I'm ready to put it on a base, but you can see I've already scored that. I put slip on it. This is a little softer now. And let's see, I should have a little scoring tool here somewhere. Do you see that? In that tray. Thought I had all those tools out, but I must have.
Looking for a multi-point.
Oh, the little scraping tool with teeth, yeah, there you go. So I'll rescore it. I don't usually use slip. I'll typically just use water and brush. Oh, here's some brushes right here. Actually, before I put that water on here, I probably should. So this is about equal stiffness. So I would probably go around this big bar pencil and take a needle.
On the ground bench.
Oh, goodness. And maybe actually, I think it'd be better just to score the inside. And then, scratch the inside here and then score this. One little, I don't know if this is really bears out to be really true, but it makes sense. Sometimes you just have to rely on what makes sense when you hear some new idea, technique for doing something. It's awfully hard to prove that it works, but if it solves a problem or feels like it might be reason enough to do it if it just makes sense. But to make these scoring lines radiate out, so if there's a little error or something in there, it escapes through those little cuts, those little channels, rather than going around, which would be a lot easier to go around this way, but you might actually have little air pockets and moisture trapped in there. And then just wet that whole thing. Wouldn't hurt to even do a little bit more scoring. The thing with clay is it doesn't matter how well you stick it down, if the two parts are different enough in dryness, it's going to break. And sometimes it breaks more dramatically if you really put it together well. And there's that difference because there's so much, it wants to bond, but it can't. And that's a lot of energy that suddenly gives way in a crack. Does that make sense? If you really weld it, score deep and you put a lot of slip and a lot of pressure and you force those things together, you're just absolutely certain it's welded as well as it can be. Then when it breaks, it's like an explosion almost. That doesn't make sense, does it? It's like two pieces of metal welded together. No, it's not either. That's not a good analogy.
Not quite.
No.
Not a,
When it breaks mine. If it's really stuck together. But the real key is getting those two parts the same degree of moisture when they go together, and then apply a little moisture and a lot of pressure. Kind of twisting that decide whether or not to overhang there or undercut that. I think for this, I'm just gonna undercut it. Now this is kind of new work, really. I mean, I wanna do more with it, maybe do larger pieces. I've done a good amount of this on a smaller scale. So, this is probably not something you can see in the gallery. But hopefully, in the future, you'll see more and more of that, this kind of thing. Now, when you push it into an oval, sometimes it has a little bit of a dip at the top, so I would typically throw this over on something soft, because I don't want to flatten out those edges. And is there a paddle over there in that bottom? With that. That's it. That'll work. Yeah, that's good. And so next step would be to paddle that down. I suppose I could use this same tool, but I would want to go keep that under. Now I think this will work as long as I draw this toward that. If I pull it this way, it might pull the bottom off. So I want to pull those two together. Now the difference in this clay is I'm using a little bit of scrap clay. I've been using Laguna B-Mix, but in a way that makes very little sense because I mean it's a nice white stoneware, but it comes from Laguna clay in Florida, so you're paying freight on a lot of water. And this other clay is
It was California.
huh?
California.
No, I think it's Florida's where it comes from. It's made locally. What's it called? A lot of people use it. It's a good white. White, yeah, Dillawhite. And it's processed in Austin, so it's a little cheaper, and I've been trying to just convert over to it. So this is kind of a mixture of the two clays. Yeah. But they both fire about the same color. The Dillawhite is a little bit darker, a little darker gray. But other than that, they're pretty similar clays. I think they have about the same shrinkage, so they'll probably stay together fine. If it doesn't, rest of the Okay, so anyway, so then another option to kind of animate that a little bit more might be to add legs on it, but that lilt is pretty effective, you know, in terms of, and I could add handles, I could add a handle over the top. But I kind of think I want to keep that pretty minimal, because it makes this, I think, work a little bit better. I don't want to change direction suddenly and start decorating it or adding more parts. I like it that it's pretty minimal and clean.
Do the lid like the ginger jars?
Yeah, you could do a lid. The only problem now is getting a lid to fit that oval shape.
You would have had it done at the same time.
Yeah, plus you have to do it at the same time because you want it. If it fits in the beginning, it'll fit at the end after the drawing. And just to clean up the inside and weld that a little bit better. Is anticipating, you know what's going next, so it's good to have you over near the tools. But you can clean, that's a great way to clean up that bottom, and it always bothers me a little to look down in there and see a lot of scrappy stuff that didn't get dealt with. And it's not just appearance, it's, you know, when you smear over that surface, you're really kind of welding. Cracks get started in those places where there's a little bit of separation and it's not really finished well, and it'll just open up. When if you just finish that edge, and the crack might never get started. Yeah. Okay, so that's that, and I think we're probably at almost an hour. You know, when I first started doing these demos,